Welcome back to our channel where we post short and long scary stories for your entertainment. Today's story is about a young married couple whose peaceful and quiet life in woods away from a nearby town will make them rethink their decision after an unexpected encounter. But we will not keep you waiting any longer and let you enjoy today's story. The Goatman followed us home. The forest held its breath as they drove through it. Ancient pines, thick as pillars in a forgotten cathedral, swallowed the moonlight, leaving the narrow asphalt road as the only tether to the world they knew. Edward kept his hands steady on the wheel, the faint glow of the dashboard illuminating the tired lines around his eyes. Beside him, his wife, Rose, was asleep, her head resting against the passenger window, the rhythmic hum of the engine a lullaby. They were on their way home. It was their slice of paradise, this house. A modern A-frame with wide glass windows nestled just so on the edge of the sprawling national forest. They were close enough to the small town of Havenwood for groceries and a sense of community, but far enough away to feel the profound, healing silence of the wild. To Edward, a firefighter accustomed to the shriek of sirens and the roar of infernos, that silence was the most precious commodity on earth. All of a sudden, a shadow darted across the road. Edward slammed on the brakes. The tires screeched, a violent protest that tore through the quiet night. Rose jolted awake with a gasp, her hand flying to her chest. What is it?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep and alarm. "Something, an animal," Edward said, his heart hammering against his ribs. He peered through the windshield into the oppressive dark. The high beams cut a swathe through the gloom, but the road ahead was empty. "A big deer, I think. It was fast." He unbuckled his seatbelt. "Stay here. I want to make sure I didn't hit it." "Ed, no. Just drive," Rose pleaded, her eyes wide as she scanned the black wall of trees. The woods no longer felt peaceful. They felt watchful, predatory. "It'll just take a second." His firefighter's instinct, the ingrained need to assess and secure a scene, took over. He grabbed the heavy mag light from the glove compartment and stepped out of the car. The air was cold and heavy with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. But underneath it was something else. A thick, musky odor, like wet wool and rot. He wrinkled his nose. He'd smelled decay before, but this was different. It was alive. He swept the beam of the flashlight across the asphalt. No blood, no fur. He walked to the edge of the road, the light cutting a nervous path through the undergrowth. Nothing, just the impenetrable dark and the unnerving silence. The crickets had stopped chirping. The night birds were mute. It was as if his screeching tires had frightened the entire forest into holding its tongue. He was about to turn back when he saw the tracks. They were in the soft dirt on the shoulder of the road. They were cloven like a deer's, but they were wrong, deeper, larger. And the gate, they weren't side by side. One was behind the other, as if whatever made them had been walking upright, on two legs. A cold dread, unfamiliar and primal, trickled down his spine. This wasn't a deer. "Ed, get back in the car." Rose's voice was sharp with fear. He didn't argue. He hurried back, the crunch of his boots on the gravel sounding deafeningly loud. He slid into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and threw the car into drive, peeling away from the spot with a spray of stones. "What did you see?" Rose asked, her gaze fixed on the rearview mirror as if expecting to see something pursuing them. "Nothing," he lied, not wanting to give her fear a shape. "Just some weird tracks. Probably a bear." But he knew it wasn't a bear. He'd seen bear tracks. This was something else entirely. Their house was a welcome beacon of light and warmth. Inside, Edward tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to a long shift and a tired mind. He built a fire, the crackle and pop of the logs, comforting sound against the oppressive silence outside. They sat together on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, but the tension from the road lingered between them. The first sound was a soft thump against the back of the house. "What was that?" Rose whispered, her body tensing against his. "Pine cone falling on the roof," Edward said automatically. "It happens all the time." But it hadn't sounded like a pine cone. It had sounded heavier, softer, more deliberate. Later, as they were getting ready for bed, it came again. A scraping sound, this time against the large picture window in the living room that faced the woods, like a branch being dragged across the glass. Edward went to the window, peering out into the darkness illuminated by their porch light. He saw nothing but their own pale, worried reflections staring back at him. "There's no wind, Ed. The branches aren't moving." Rose's voice was barely a tremor. He knew she was right. The air was unnervingly still. He forced a confident smile. "I'll check the locks." He walked through the house, double-checking every window, every door. Everything was secure. Their home was a fortress. But as he passed the kitchen door, the one that led to the back deck, he smelled it again. That same pungent, musky odor from the roadside. It was faint, seeping in from under the door, a foul miasma that made the hair on his arms stand up. He didn't tell Rose. That night, sleep offered no escape. Edward was plagued by dreams of splintered trees and a tall, horned shadow that moved with a disjointed, unnatural gait. He woke up in a cold sweat just before dawn. The image of a pair of luminous yellow eyes burned into the back of his mind. The next morning, Rose found the hoof prints. She had gone out to tend to her small vegetable garden near the tree line. Her scream brought Edward running, a half-eaten piece of toast still in his hand. She was standing frozen, pointing a trembling finger at the soft soil between her tomato plants. There, pressed deep into the earth, were the same cloven tracks he'd seen on the road. They were a clear, terrifying declaration. A single line of them, leading from the dark woods, circling the house once before retreating back into the trees. One of the prints was pressed so hard into the ground beside the living room window that the soil had cracked around it. As if something had stood there for a long time, watching them. Edward's rationalizations crumbled into dust. This wasn't a bear. This wasn't his imagination. Something had followed them home. That day, the house no longer felt like a sanctuary. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside sent a fresh wave of anxiety through them. The vast windows, once a source of beauty, now felt like 100 unblinking eyes, exposing them to the watchful woods. They kept the curtains drawn, living in a self-imposed twilight. By nightfall, the fear had curdled into a thick, suffocating dread. They sat in the living room, the fire roaring, every lamp in the house turned on. They didn't speak, they just listened. The sound started just after 10, a soft tapping on the roof, like rain, but the sky was clear and studded with stars. Then a low, guttural bleat from the edge of the property. It sounded like a goat, but distorted, elongated into something mournful and menacing. Rose began to cry softly, her hands covering her ears. Edward put his arm around her, his own body rigid with tension. He was a man who ran into burning buildings, a man trained to face down chaos and terror. But this was different. This was a slow, creeping invasion of his own sacred space. Fire had rules. You could fight it, you could understand it. You couldn't fight a shadow that smelled of the grave and walked on 2 hooves. A loud, violent bang on the front door made them both jump. It sounded like someone had thrown their whole body against it. Edward grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace, his knuckles white. "Who's there?" he shouted, his voice betraying a tremor. The only answer was a low, guttural chuckle from the other side of the door. It was a wet, phlegmy sound that seemed to mock his pathetic display of defiance. Then the doorknob began to jiggle. Violently. The metal rattled in its housing, the wood of the door groaning under an immense, unseen pressure. "Go away!" Rose shrieked, her voice cracking. The rattling stopped. For a moment there was silence. Then a new sound began, a sharp rhythmic scraping against the base of the door. Scrape, 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 like a hoof being dragged impatiently back and forth on their welcome mat. Edward felt a surge of desperate, furious adrenaline. He wasn't going to cower in his own home. He stormed to the door, poker held high, and peered through the peephole. For a second, all he saw was coarse, dark fur pressed against the lens. Then it pulled back, and he saw its face. The sight was a violation of sanity. It was a grotesque fusion of man and beast. The long, narrow face was covered in matted black hair with a snout-like nose and thick, curling lips that peeled back to reveal yellow, square teeth. But the eyes were the worst. They were not the simple, vacant eyes of an animal. They were intelligent. They were ancient and filled with a profound, calculating malice, and they were staring directly back at him. As it held his gaze, a single massive horn, scarred and chipped, rose from its forehead. Edward stumbled back from the door, a strangled gasp escaping his lips. The image was seared into his brain. The Goatman. The name bloomed in his mind, dredged up from some half-forgotten local ghost story he'd heard in town. A creature of the deep woods, a harbinger of misfortune and death. A thunderous crash from the back of the house shattered his horrified trance. The sound of breaking glass. "It's in the kitchen!" Rose screamed. He grabbed her hand and pulled her towards the stairs. "The bedroom! Go!" They scrambled up the stairs, their footsteps echoing in the suddenly cavernous house. Below them, they heard the heavy, uneven clomp-clomp of hooves on their hardwood floor. A sound that had no place in a home. It was followed by the crash of breaking dishes and a low, angry snuffling as the creature explored their space, tainting it with its presence. They slammed the bedroom door shut, and Edward shoved a heavy oak dresser in front of it. He looked around frantically. There was no escape. The bedroom window was a 10-foot drop to the unforgiving ground below. They were trapped. A deafening bang on the bedroom door sent splinters flying into the room. The dresser shuddered. The creature was unbelievably strong. It hit the door again, and a crack appeared in the solid wood. Rose was sobbing in the corner, her face pale with terror. Edward looked at her, then around the room, his mind racing. Fire. He fought fire. Fire was a purifier. It was a weapon. His eyes landed on his emergency go bag in the closet, the one he kept packed for sudden calls. He ripped it open, tossing aside spare uniforms and first aid kits until he found what he was looking for. A pack of high-intensity road flares. Another splintering crash on the door. The top hinge buckled. Any second now, it would be inside with them. "Rose, get behind the bed," he yelled, ripping the cap off a flare. He struck the flint strip. A blinding, hissing crimson light filled the room, casting dancing, demonic shadows on the walls. The flare smoked and sputtered, an angry, chemical fire. The door burst inwards, the dresser flying across the room as if it were made of cardboard. The Goatman stood in the ruined doorway, silhouetted against the light from the hall. It was massive, easily 7 feet tall. Its powerful, goat-like legs were bent at an unnatural angle, and its humanoid torso was a slab of thick muscle covered in coarse fur. It lowered its horned head and let out a roar, a terrifying, deafening sound that was half human scream, half bestial bellow. It took a step into the room, its malevolent yellow eyes fixing on Edward. The smell of it was overpowering, a gagging stench of musk, mud, and something anciently foul. "Get the hell out of my house!" Edward screamed, a primal cry of a man defending his lair. He threw the hissing flare. It hit the creature square in the chest. The Goatman shrieked, a high-pitched sound of pain and surprise. It was not the heat that hurt it, but the light. The intense, unnatural magnesium glare seemed to burn it, to violate its very nature. It stumbled backward, swatting at the flare stuck in its matted fur, its eyes squeezed shut against the searing red light. Seizing the moment, Edward grabbed the heaviest thing he could find, a bedside lamp, and charged. He brought the lamp down on the creature's horned head with all his strength. There was a dull, sickening crack. The creature staggered, disoriented by the light and the blow. It gave one last hateful glare, its yellow eyes glowing with raw fury. Then it turned and fled. They heard its heavy hooves clattering down the stairs, the sound of the front door being torn from its hinges, and then silence. A silence that was deeper and more complete than any they had ever known. Edward stood panting in the ruined doorway, the lamp shattered in his hands. The house was a wreck. The air was thick with the creature's foul stench. He looked at Rose, who was huddled behind the bed, staring at him with tear-filled, terrified eyes. They survived the night, but as the first pale light of dawn crept through their broken windows, illuminating the destruction and the lingering scent of fear, they knew it wasn't over. They had won a battle, not the war. They had looked into the face of the woods and seen the ancient, hungry thing that lived in its heart, and in turn had seen them. It knew their scent, it knew their fear, it knew where they lived. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. Edward simply went to Rose, helped her to her feet, and began packing a bag. Their slice of paradise had become a cage, and the watchful predator was still out there, waiting in the tree line, patient and eternal. They could leave, but they knew they would never truly escape the memory of the night the Goatman followed them home. So, did you enjoy today's story? If yes, then please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Come back next time for another story, and thank you for listening.